All right, let's kick things off today. We're diving deep into Indonesia's new cabinet. President Prabowo, sworn in on October 20th, just revealed his team, and, well, it's a big one.
Definitely not a small team.
Red and white cabinet, 109 members, biggest since 1966. So what's the strategy here? Why such a massive cabinet?
Well, looking back, massive cabinets often pop up when things are a bit shaky, politically speaking.
Right, like trying to build a really broad coalition just to keep things stable.
Exactly. I mean, you get everyone on board, right? It's like a show of force. But there's the flip side. Huge bureaucracy, decisions take forever.
Yeah, makes sense.
Prabowo even said some might call it a fat cabinet, but he's going for strong, even if it means a few extra folks around the table.
So he's walking a fine line there. Big team, but got to project that image of strength and efficiency. Now, one appointment that's got everyone talking is Sri Mulyani Indrawati back as finance minister.
Oh, absolutely.
Third time.
Yeah.
She was there under Yudhoyono, then Jokowi, and now Prabowo. What does that tell us? Especially with Prabowo aiming for that 8% growth. Pretty ambitious.
Definitely ambitious. But look, Sri Mulyani, she's got the respect, handled Indonesia's economy through some rough patches. The global financial crisis, the pandemic, she's a safe pair of hands.
Right, so a sign of stability then.
Absolutely, especially for those foreign investors. They're going to be watching closely, seeing what Prabowo's economic policies are going to be.
So, smart move by Prabowo, having that steady hand on the economy, especially if he's going to be boosting spending on things like defense and social programs. And speaking of familiar faces, Tito Karnavian's back at the Interior Ministry. We've got a bunch of folks from Jokowi's cabinet returning. Is this Jokowi's influence hanging on, or is Prabowo strategically building some bridges here?
Probably a little of both. Keeping some things consistent, that just makes the transition smoother. Ministries like Interior, they're complex.
Right, lots of moving parts.
But don't forget the PDIP, largest party in parliament, and now they're in opposition.
Josie's party, right?
Exactly. So Prabowo, he needs to build his own power base, and these cabinet appointments, well, they could be a way to solidify support, counterbalance the potential opposition from the PDIP.
That's a good point. And, the PDIP, they've never been shy about speaking up. They've challenged previous administrations, even launched those parliamentary inquiries to hold the government accountable.
Oh, yeah. They can be a very effective opposition force.
So we're not just talking about expertise or continuity here. It's about internal politics, too. Fascinating mix. Policy and politics all rolls into one. But let's shift gears a bit. International stage now. Lots of chatter about Indonesia potentially joining BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, often seen as that counterweight to the Western-led institutions. What do you make of this? What signals has Prabowo been sending?
Even before he officially took office, Prabowo was quite vocal, critical of what he called Western double standards, especially when it comes to trade and economics. And look at his travel schedule. China, Japan, Australia, France, Russia, even Saudi Arabia, all before becoming president. That's a pretty clear sign of a proactive foreign policy, maybe even a more assertive one.
So testing the waters a bit, maybe looking at alternatives to those traditional Western alliances that have been so central to Indonesian foreign policy. Joining BRICS, that would be a huge statement. Could mean a shift away from the West, a move towards that multipolar world order everyone's talking about.
Absolutely. Big questions, though. How would this affect Indonesia's relationship with the U.S., still their biggest trading partner? What about the G20 and Indonesia wanting to join the OECD? And then there's the South China Sea, ongoing disputes there with China, a major BRICS player.
So many factors to consider, yeah. It's like a delicate dance. But let's zoom in on one specific appointment that's raising eyebrows. Shavershi Shamsoidin as defense minister. Both him and Prabowo, they come from military backgrounds, Kopassus, the special forces. What does this mean for Prabowo's goal of modernizing the Indonesian military?
As soon as that appointment was announced, people started speculating. What's Indonesia's defense strategy going to look like now? Then we see Shafri meeting with the Chinese ambassador, talks about more defense cooperation, maybe even joint military exercises.
Wow, that's big. And what about Indonesia's Minimum Essential Force Plan, the MEF? They've been trying to modernize for years, but there have been roadblocks, funding issues, deals falling through.
Right.
How does Joffrey fit into all of this? And what about this outreach to China?
That's the million-dollar question. Prabowo has been clear. Strong military is essential, especially with those South China Sea disputes. Could closer ties with China be the key to getting that tech, maybe even joint development projects to help them reach their modernization goals? Or is this more about managing those tensions, keeping things stable in a region that's becoming a real geopolitical hotspot?
It's a puzzle, that's for sure. And we'll have to wait and see how it all unfolds. But before we go too far down that road, let's circle back to those familiar faces from the Jokowi era.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix. Like Trade Minister Zulkifli Hassan, Energy Minister Balila Hadalia, they're both back.
Right, those are big ones.
And that experience, that could be really valuable for Prabowo, especially with him trying to attract that foreign investment and get that economic growth going.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
But, keeping those folks from the previous administration, that raises questions too. Like, how much influence does Jokowi still have? And could this cause friction within the coalition?
Yeah, it's like he's trying to build those bridges, but also carve out his own path at the same time. But you mentioned attracting foreign investment. How's he going to hit that 8% growth target? It's ambitious, especially with how the global economy is looking right now.
Well, one thing we're seeing is a big focus on attracting foreign investment. He's already been meeting with international investors, talking about making things more business friendly. And, having Sri Mulyani there as finance minister, that sends a strong signal.
Stability, right?
Exactly. And predictability. That's what investors want, especially those foreign investors keeping a close eye on Indonesia's economy.
Smart move. She's definitely got that international reputation. Yeah. But Prabowo has expressed some concerns about free trade agreements in the past, hasn't he? So they haven't always worked out so well for Indonesia. Could this mean we're heading towards more protectionism?
That's the big question, right? What's his economic agenda going to look like? We've seen mixed signals so far. On the one hand, he talks about protecting those domestic industries, but then he also acknowledges that international trade is key for growth.
It's a tough one. How do you strike that balance? Protect your own industries, but also engage in global trade. Lots of developing nations grapple with that.
It's a classic dilemma.
Let's go back to BRICS for a minute. We talked about the geopolitical stuff, but what about the economic impact? Indonesia joins BRICS. How does that affect their economy?
Well, you've got some of the fastest growing economies in the world in BRICS. Closer ties could open up some big opportunities for Indonesia. New markets, more investment.
Okay, I see.
We could see more trade in commodities, manufactured goods, even technology. But there's also the risk of becoming too reliant on a country like China, which has been expanding its influence in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, there's always that concern.
More markets, more investment, that's great, but becoming too dependent on any one country, even a powerhouse like China, that could be risky in the long run.
A double-edged sword then. And then there's the OECD. Indonesia's thinking about joining that too, right?
Right.
A group of mostly developed nations.
Exactly.
That would be a big signal, a commitment to certain economic and governance standards.
Yeah.
But didn't we talk about this earlier? That could make Prabowo's plans for a more independent foreign policy kind of tricky.
Yeah. The OECD, it's often seen as representing that Western-centric model of economic governance. And don't forget that potential requirement to normalize relations with Israel to join. That's a big hurdle for Prabowo. He's been pretty clear about his stance on the Palestinian issue.
So lots of moving pieces on the foreign policy front. Joining BRICS, that would be a bold move. Aligning with the OECD, well, that's a different kind of statement. Where do you see this all going?
It's like he's playing a high-stakes game of chess. Prabowo's weighing his options, trying to figure out how to balance Indonesia's economic interests with their strategic ambitions.
And all while navigating those domestic and international pressures.
Exactly. And speaking of domestic pressures, we can't forget about the PDIP.
Right, Jokowi's party. How are they going to react to all of this? Especially this BRICS stuff and the OECD thing.
Well, they've historically been all about that non-aligned foreign policy. They don't want to get too close to the West or to China.
Right, playing it safe.
Exactly. So a move towards BRICS, that might not go over so well. Could create some friction, maybe even opposition in the parliament. On the other hand, joining the OECD, that could be a different story.
I see, because it's a club of mostly developed nations.
Right, and it could be seen as a sign that Indonesia is making progress economically, that they're committed to those democratic values. That could strengthen Prabowo's position domestically.
So everything he does on the world stage has ripple effects back home. He's walking a tightrope, domestic stability on one side and trying to assert Indonesia's role globally on the other.
Exactly. It all comes down to careful calculation, understanding how those domestic and international politics intertwine. And let's not forget the big question looming over all of this. Will this cabinet, this mix of old and new, will it help him achieve his goals or hold him back?
A question for the ages. And that's something we'll be digging into as we look at the specific challenges and opportunities facing this new administration. But first, let's shift gears and talk about Prabowo's vision for Indonesia's defense. Okay, so we've talked about Shafri Shamsodin as the new defense minister, that meeting with the Chinese ambassador. It seems like Prabowo is really serious about boosting Indonesia's military, but the MEF, that minimum essential force plan, it hasn't always gone smoothly, has it? What are some of the hurdles you think they're going to face, Prabowo and Shafri?
Well, funding, that's always a big one. Modernizing military, that takes serious cash. In Indonesia, they've had some trouble finding the money for the MEF in the past. Prabowo said he wants to up the defense spending, but how's he going to do that? With all the other economic goals he's got, it's a tough balancing act. And then there's technology. In Indonesia, they've gotten their military equipment from all over, Western countries, Russia, you name it. But with this whole BRICS thing and Shafri reaching out to China, well, we might see some changes there.
Interesting. So could this be about more than just buying equipment? Could closer ties with China mean like technology sharing, maybe even joint development projects? I mean, Indonesia's been trying to build up their own defense industry for ages, right?
They have, and it hasn't been easy. But China, they've been making some real progress with their own defense tech, and they've shown they're willing to partner up, especially with Southeast Asian countries. But there's usually a catch, right? Those partnerships, they often come with strings attached. Prabowo is going to have to think carefully about what it all means for Indonesia's independence, their relationships with other countries in the region, especially the U.S.
Yeah, there's always that geopolitical chess game going on. Seems like Prabowo's trying to chart a new course for Indonesia, more independent, but he knows he needs those strategic partners too.
It's a tough line to walk, and it's all happening against this backdrop of global uncertainty, U.S.-China tensions, the situation in Europe, all those conflicts around the world. Prabowo stepping in at a really volatile time is going to be a real test of his leadership.
Definitely a lot on his plate. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. The size of the cabinet, all those familiar faces, Prabowo's foreign policy, those potential moves with BRICS and the OECD, his plans for the military. It's clear that things are changing, but there's also a sense of continuity. He's mixing things up.
And we've still got those big questions hanging in the air, don't we? Is this huge cabinet going to help him or just slow things down? Can he really hit that 8% growth target? Is he going to lean towards BRICS, go for the OECD, or try to find some middle ground? And, the biggest question of all, what does all of this mean for Indonesia? How will Prabowo's leadership shape their future?
Those are the questions, aren't they? And we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But hopefully we've given everyone some food for thought, some historical context.
Yeah, and some questions to ponder. It's a fascinating time for Indonesia, and Prabowo's presidency, it's just getting started. As we watch what he does, we'll get a better sense of what's shaping Indonesia's future and how it all fits into the bigger picture in the Asia-Pacific region and globally.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you found it informative and engaging. Keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep